Um, so I have in mind a little spiel, and then very interested in ideas, comments, corrections, questions that might arise. I don't feel like I have anything really new to teach along these lines of keeping things simple and clear. What I mean to say is you've almost certainly heard it before in one context or another. I did actually have a new insight at about 11 o'clock last Saturday morning, which I'll be happy to share later on if you remind me to. But what I have to share about teaching in a way that has clarity and simplicity is something that's been a framework for a long time. And undoubtedly, whatever year you were in TMF, there was some point or other where I gave that spiel. And it is a passion of mine. It's connected, of course, with the aspiration to teach in a way that's accessible, you know, that isn't merely kind of inspiring people without actually giving them some practical guidance. And it's certainly not, you know, the aspiration is not to impress them with what I know or entertain them without actually giving some specific usable guidance. And you know, it's there are lots of different ways to teach. And I think that one of the beautiful aspects of the TMF over the years has been, it really has, I hope, functioned as a crucible so that people coming together from many different walks of life find that you are able, I hope it happened for you, that able to develop your voice, right? Or to take some steps towards finding a way to speak, to teach, to share, and in the same way, finding audiences or people or one or two people to share with in a way. And so I do not assume there's one size that fits all and so forth. That being said, I think there are some principles that it's useful to keep in mind and remind ourselves of, and that actually can be good touchstones to come back to at times when we feel stuck or when classes don't seem to be working. And as a philosophy professor, I definitely had those experiences of, you know, sometimes it's a chemistry of a class or a group, and they do vary quite a lot. So when I was a graduate student at Duke in philosophy, the American Dance Festival started having their summer festivals on campus. And there was, and you know, with some friends, we would find our way into these performances without paying. And I can't remember how we did that exactly, but it was fun. There were some really great dancers there during the summer. And one very notable performance for me was Laura Dean came and was doing this very minimal dance to very minimal music, maybe Stephen Reich, I think. And it was maybe 45 minutes of twirling, you know, just, and a lot of the audience walked out. It was just too radical, you know, or too, I don't know what it was I don't know why they left. They might have had something else to do, but I loved it. I loved it. And it came to mind partly because I read an article in the New York Times this morning about Stephen Reich, who's 86 years old. But it also came to mind in that the simplicity, the minimality the minimalism of that sort of dance and so forth is not my theme here. It's not that I have some conception of what we do as a sort of minimalist art form. Much more, it's like in my own practice and my understanding of meditation, the basics are actually that simple. They're so simple, right? And so we do people a great favor, in my view, if we just kind of open that door so they can see into the simplicity of what meditation is. And sometimes that means clarifying misconceptions they have about it being more complicated than it is. So many of you, some of you have been in classes or, you know, worked with 175 or something like that. I don't, over these years, I have not progressed as a meditation teacher in terms of changing the way I approach it. And even in the pandemic, I started doing online the Monday drop-in, and at 12:30 on Pacific time. And I had been doing it in the Reagan Hospital on campus before the pandemic. And I swear I do more or less the same thing every Monday. And I don't know why people come back, you know. And of course, there may be plenty of people who don't come back precisely because I repeat myself. But I don't exactly repeat myself. It's more, I make sure I cover the basics because I assume that often with 100 or so people, there are new people there. So they're first in line for my attention. I want to be sure to communicate with them. I want them to not, that's my bottom line. It's like, you know, but the other thing is, my belief is that for most people, even when they're experienced, even perhaps when they have a lot of experience, it can be useful to be reminded of the basics. And in my way of thinking about it, it's not that as we gain more experience, we suddenly kind of come into methods of meditation that take one level and complexify it to another level and so forth. Our practice can deepen and be refined, but my sense of it is that it remains fairly simple. And there's room for disagreement here along these lines. But as you know, if you've been in a class or a drop-in with me, you know, I like to keep it, I'll just give a brief overview of what I do. It's like just that two things with mindfulness. First is that use of our attention, where we ask ourselves to do something surprising because we ask ourselves to focus attention on something actually happening in our experience and something that's not terribly exciting. And of course, we're all familiar with this. Most forms of meditation, not all, but most begin this way, one way or another. And I think it's useful to make it clear to students that this is doable. We're not going to do it perfectly, but it's doable. We don't have to get information about meditation and then start later, right? We can do it now. And it's as easy as, if you can see my hand, just focusing the visual attention on my hand. And we're not going to use my hand for the meditation, so I'll make that joke. But we could, in principle, we can use a visual object. And the framework for doing this, for engaging in this activity, is, in my understanding, the mental activity of focusing and sustaining attention. In Pali language, vitaka, vichara. Those two elements of mental activity are the catalyst for concentration. And that's all one needs to do to get going, is just focus attention and sustain attention. Now, here I'm relying on Theravadan Buddhist psychology, and there's maybe plenty of room for disagreement, but here I'm also speaking from my own experience in meditation, which included being somewhat surprised. When I started as a philosophy graduate student, I was fairly skeptical about meditation and kind of assumed it probably would involve some sort of belief structure, or, and was quite surprised and I was ready for it. So it happened. I mean, I got concentrated by doing this and could see for myself that it was not only interesting, but quite important. So just one caveat for everything I say along these lines, people differ in our capacities for concentration. Here, the Buddhist psychology is also quite rich, different types of people, differing strengths and so forth. And so this focus on concentration can be taken too far, because some of our students may not be so ready and so forth. Nonetheless, I think my conjecture, this could be studied, my conjecture is that for most people, it is a useful door in, even if they're not going to be inclined to even if wisdom is more their strength than concentration and so forth. So here we get to see, in talking about this, it's like I've already made it 5 times more complicated than necessary. There's no doubt about it. And I knew that would happen. And that's just, so feel free to interrupt me, by the way, too. As a teacher, I'm definitely better when I get interrupted. But the idea is people do come to meditation now with ideas. And so even when we invite them to focus on the feel of the breath or focus on ambient sounds and so forth, one of the big misconceptions that seem prevalent, and I'm curious if you've encountered this as well, is the idea that if they were only doing it right, they would be able to clear their mind. This became real poignant. And a few months in June, I did a session for high school students who were at UCLA as part of the summer school program for high school students. And I just did an hour. And afterwards, this girl wrote to me and said that, I talked with her after the presentation, that she wrote to me later. And she had been suffering from nightmares. And so every night she would have a nightmare and this had been going on for months. And so she had a couple of therapists, and one of them had suggested meditation. And, without pointing any fingers at anyone, I don't know who they are, she got the idea that she was supposed to try to push the negative thoughts away, that was what meditation meant, that in the midst of that experience, push against it, try to clear her mind in a way. And so of course I was happy to talk with her about it and clarify that no, it's much easier than that, and there are things we can do that might be useful and so forth, but it doesn't involve that sort of micromanaging our experience by trying to clear our minds, by trying to make ourselves peaceful in any way. It's much more doable. It's in the midst of things. First of all, that sort of, okay, remembering that I have some choice as to where to place attention. And of course, I see your hand, Rachel. Just let me finish this thought. Of course, in addition to that vitakka vichara, focusing, sustaining attention with something relatively simple, the other part of mindfulness practice, as I understand it, is that sort of radical openness to whatever happens, right? Including it in the meditation, whether it's physical pain or grief or anxiety or the emotions in a nightmare. We actually make space for it and not pushing against it to try to get rid of it, but including the experience with that option to shift the attention back. So Rachel, hi, good to see you.
Hi. So I'm playing along because you asked for interaction. So
No,
I thought
please.
I would.
Absolutely.
I'm at a friend's birthday and I've hidden away in the living room. So if you hear some interference, that's why. Yeah, I love that you bring up this idea. Obviously, it's a misconception that a lot of our first time students or maybe returning students who haven't been with us have, is that their mind should be clear. What I find fascinating is the anxiety of I'm not doing it right.
Yeah,
The anxiety of my
absolutely.
mind is not clear or my mind wandered and I'm bad
Yeah,
will create shame, and the shame and the nervous system activation is obviously going to be a barrier for practice. So
yeah,
um I like to, and I teach, you probably know, but for those here, I teach in a very science focused, very simple way, kind of like Mr. Rogers of meditation. And I always like to say that we're giving the mind a smaller job. And
yes,
the,
absolutely.
yeah, you have so many things, and it's okay. It's normal that you would have other things going through your mind. And we allow our mind to have just a smaller job. And so it's,
Yeah,
I find that, especially with workplace populations, because they're so stressed
yeah,
these days,
yeah,
the idea that they can give their mind a smaller job is
yeah,
that feels successful for them.
absolutely. I love that way of putting it. Um, it's almost like the main difficulty that people encounter is that it's so damn simple, and we're used to much more complicated jobs. And we're giving ourselves permission in this period of time not to do those complicated jobs, but to do something we can do, and then have that patience to, the real effort is patience, kind of a willingness to stay with it, and so forth. Because
Yeah,
yeah,
and it's honing the for especially for some learners, they want to feel like they're learning something really useful. They're learning to perform. And
yeah,
so, for some people, they'll latch onto the, give your mind just like a smaller job
yeah,
for this time. But we're doing that to develop focus.
yeah.
And then you'll get the other learners who are, okay, I'll do the smaller job, the easier thing, because that's helping me learn to focus, which truly it is.
Well, of course, it definitely is a skill that we can hone and develop, and that is the skill that we're mustering, even though it is as damn simple as, if you can see my hand, focusing your visual attention on my hand, even when my other hand starts to do things that is, well, it's a little bit more interesting. So it takes a little bit of effort to keep it there, so it does take effort. But yeah, I like that image of a smaller job, because part of the challenge of meditation is allowing ourselves to do less. And I actually even like to normalize, like, the way that, yes, it is doable. We can feel the breath, we can notice the sounds, we can practice. It's available here and now. And yet our attention will drift, we'll get pulled away. And this is actually a function of our intelligence kicking in, because we're highly evolved to do a lot more complicated things than just pay attention to the feel of the breath. And we do have a lot of other complicated things on our minds, one way or another. And so quite naturally, our minds go there. And so the idea is, okay, yes, that will happen, but no need to shame yourself or feel like a failure. It's your intelligence kicking in. And then we can also remember that, oh, this is a field of permission now, right? Like feeling the anxiety or whatever it is, feeling the pain, the physical pain, whatever it is that's drawn our attention, it's a permission, not an obligation to investigate or change or fix. It's like, okay, if you can, it's good, but it's also okay simply to come back to that simpler object of attention. And so I love that idea of it's a smaller job, it's a field of permission. There is something to do. it's hard to do because it's so damn easy, right? We're not going to, easy may not be the right word to use, because for sure there are people for whom even a few seconds of trying to focus attention, it's that it's almost like that effort, the effort to focus attention can kind of factor into the mind being even more restless. So we want to normalize not being able, like, I'm open to feedback, by the way, as this doesn't, I don't normally have this such a great group where you might see holes in my argument. Julie, thank you, Rachel.
Hey, yeah, it's Julie. I'm not here to poke holes, but also to say, we sort of know that from physics, right? It's the counter force. So however much force you put into something, there's going to be a counter force. But what I wanted to add is that I get a lot of questions about, what to do with thoughts when they come up. And one of the instructions I had always been given, and I always am evaluating, is it the right thing to say to this person, right? Based on what I know and what they're really asking, trying to get at what they're really asking. But one of the things that I had been instructed on was to give it more room, right? And we're so used to, like, when we hear focus, it's sort of a light attention when we're giving meditation instruction, right? It's not like this heavy, you're driving a car at night and it's in a strange city. It's not that.
Right.
And so, but the instruction is, if you notice that you are having a lot of thoughts, is to actually open the gate, just let them go, right? Let them out.
Yeah.
So let it come, let it be, let it go. Sort of.
Yeah. Right. With thoughts, we certainly don't want to encourage the idea that they're supposed to be mindful of thoughts in a way that involves trying to keep up with them, right? Or they're going too fast. And so just kind of know that we're thinking and let them be. And anything, I mean, it's like the idea that somehow we're supposed to do something to get rid of thoughts, to squelch thoughts, to clear our minds is almost the opposite of what we're trying to convey to people. And so we do want to make it clear that we don't want to just sit there and mull things over, right? But that's where just reminding that. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I also think having a period of time that you set for yourself, right? Like, I'm going to commit to this for 10 minutes at a time, and during that time, here's what I'm going to do. Sort of makes it easier for students to follow the instruction rather than some open-ended, oh, this is every minute of my life from now on, which it will be maybe one day, but right now, just 10 minutes, 20 minutes, something. Yeah.
Yeah. Or 5. This is a little bit of a parallel thing. Another misconception that seems common, not as much as in my experience as that we're supposed to, if we were only doing it right, we'd be able to clear our minds. But another is that in order to do it right, I need to do a certain amount of meditation a day. And I don't believe that. I really don't think that it's helpful for most people to set up a time standard, but that could vary from context to context. And with my undergrad class, of course, I do have a certain structure they're supposed to do, but I try to frame it in terms of, look, we need some structure for the course, but you can split it up into 2 or more segments. The more we do it, the better. Right. And so, especially with beginners, try to do it every day, but don't set up a time standard. And then the more we practice, the better. Okay. So there was a second high school student. So by the way, I did get an email a few days later from the nightmare girl, and she was just like, I've tried not to write to you because I know it's only been 3 days, and I know it may not keep working, but it's worked. So I haven't had a nightmare since we talked, and so that was a success story. There was another girl who I had a conversation with her after that session also, and she wrote also talking about how important it had been for her to see that her having difficult emotions didn't necessarily mean that something was wrong with her. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because we all know that, right? Every one of us in this room today know that for sure. We know that. It's like, yeah. And yet, for how many of us, I'm not asking for real hands up, but for how many of us is this still a live issue, right? It's so natural in a way to kind of be angry or anxious or to be grieving, and to very subtly be feeling like if only I were doing something right, or if only I were doing something better, I wouldn't be in this state. And so this lesson that we would include even with beginners, even the first time, is like something that we keep learning and keep learning. And I think this is why reminding people of the absolute basics, when you notice you're feeling anxious, just feel what's going on, can be helpful, right? In any case, I'm speaking for myself here, for sure. That her words, this high school girl's words, spoke to me also. It's just like, yep, I appreciate what you're saying, not merely because it's nice you heard what I was saying, but because it's nice to have it reflected back in this moment to me, that the fact that I might be feeling anxious or feeling grief doesn't mean something's wrong with me. It's a normal human state, right? And so in my picture of mindfulness, we're teaching that, and we're teaching how to cultivate some degree of concentration as a sort of stabilizing factor. And so that simplicity and clarity around, yeah, right here and now, you can focus your attention. Well, give you some choices, sounds, feelings, sensations in your body, sensations of the breath. The mind can do this. We won't do it perfectly. We're not trying to clear the space so much as just notice something actually happening. The attention will drift. Whatever happens there, it's a field of permission. And it can be valuable to notice what it's like for us to be alive right now, even when it's difficult. And even when our motivation is to handle anxiety better, or to manage pain better, or so forth, this is how we do it, right? It's not that we have some more complicated method of micromanaging these. This is how we do it, that acceptance, that willingness to be with the experience. So that's the kind of the framework. I want to pause. I have some other things to say, but I want to pause and see if there are comments or corrections or questions. Okay, let's move on. The trap for us as teachers, facilitators, is one of the traps can be where we have students who are ongoing students, and in one way or another, and they, there can be that they want us to do more, quite naturally, and it might be because we have, and we can, of course, but it's, I think, a very interesting challenge, to do more, and yet not do more by weaving in the simplicity, but in new ways. And this came up, well, in the last TMF practicum, this year in August, I was in Richland, Washington, and because one of my brothers was ill, so I'd spent some time up there. And Richland is near the Hanford site, and so I was there on August 9th, which was the anniversary of the bombing of Nagasaki. And there is a group of people in Richland who have commemorate that event, because the plutonium used in the bomb that the US dropped on Nagasaki was produced there. And so I just saw this kind of an announcement in a community newspaper. So I went to it, and it was mostly older. I didn't know anyone there. And I noticed a sense of hopelessness. These are mostly older, probably some engineers. I don't know who they were. And later I realized, and this is what I shared in the TMF, it's like, if they had asked me to give a speech to, about hopelessness or to inspire hope, I don't know if I could. If they asked me to teach meditation, I could, and so forth. And this was in the spirit of being careful what roles we allow ourselves to get into. And then I guess it was my karma that struck, because last month I was invited to give a talk on December 8th to a group called, or a company called Optimists. And they wanted me to do a presentation on actually Stacy was involved in connecting us. They want me to do a talk on optimism. And like, why the hell do you want me to do a talk on optimism? And one thing I love about being a mindfulness teacher is, in the roles I do play, not needing a religion, not having one anyway, and not having a worldview to kind of give inspiring speeches on the basis of, But then I had this wonderful conversation with this guy from the company, and I wanted to have the conversation because I wanted him to know that what I was going to do, so that they wasn't hard feelings later if I didn't give the right speech about optimism. So I said, look, I can teach the basics of mindfulness. I gave him the little 2-minute thing, kind of, what I would say. And then I said, I don't think I can give a lot of inspiring ideas to encourage optimism, but one of the realities that happen for us as humans is we get patterns of thoughts going, and we have these habits, and it's like very often enough, they're negative patterns of thoughts. And so one of the things I can teach with confidence is that there are things we can do in meditation that can have potentially some effect on the hold of these negative patterns of thoughts. And so this is, this sort of freedom from just excessively unwarranted negative thinking, right? It's a pretty minimal form of optimism, but it is in the territory. And he was like delighted. He was like, absolutely. I think, I don't know, it'll be fun to go there on December 8th. If you don't hear from me again after December 8th, yeah, you can ask Stacy what happened. But it's like a similar, the point is, I couldn't, I left the August 9th commemoration in Richland kind of feeling hopeless myself, and realizing that, wow, I do not have a worldview that, or beliefs about the world and what it is to be a human at this time. I'm not the one to give a speech about it. I could probably muster up something, but if we keep the attention on the practicalities, right, on what we actually do in meditation, then I can very sincerely, and I'm looking forward to this session, in talking about, okay, this is the basics of mindfulness. We'll do a meditation, and then we'll talk about the hold that patterns of thoughts can have, and so forth. And then some joke about I know you wanted something about optimism. This is pretty minimal, but getting out of unwarranted pessimism, well, that's a start, right? And so the idea is like, from the foundation, like another related topic would be creativity, right? Where, we all know as meditators, if we're working on a problem and so forth, it probably doesn't help to sit down to meditate on the problem and try to work it out. But we've all probably had the experience of, being willing to submit to this relatively simple activity where it's a small job, right? We're not sitting to meditate to solve all our problems, but we're taking this time. We have permission to be there. And then by being willing to put our hearts into this very simple activity, we get out of our normal habits. So there's room for something new to appear. And hello, that's creativity. And I've had that experience myself time and time again over 30, 40 years of meditating seriously. Time goes by, doesn't it? It's, and I have talked about this in different contexts, but some are really fun stories where, it's just like, I wasn't sitting to meditate to figure out what to give Diana's daughter for Christmas, for the holidays, but boom, an idea appears to me. And it's not because, and one of the interesting things that could be researched is it's partly because I'm paying attention to my thoughts in a different way. I'm not paying attention because I'm trying to solve it, but like the question in that experience, the question occurred, or the thought occurred. Okay, well, I don't know, I've told this too many times maybe, but it was a Christmas party at Diana's house. I go walking the dog with Mira, and to go out there to walk the dog, she has to carry a flashlight and the poop bag and the leash, so her hands are full and it's complicated. It all worked out fine. But so the next morning I'm meditating, and I remember that, I can't remember the sequence, but the thought occurred, oh, I should get her a gift. And in my normal daily consciousness, it's like, okay, let me make a list, get Mira a gift. But in the meditation, there was a little more space. So it was like, oh, another thought popped up. Well, if I got her something, what would I get her? And then third thought, headlamp, right? Headlamp. So, I love headlamps. I've have one handy at all times, and it's like, it was a stroke of genius. And I'm sorry, though some of you have heard this too many times, this story, and it probably gets old to hear me talk about being a genius, but it really was, like, to me, an example of creativity coming out of the meditative activity, not, Lord knows, not because I was sitting down to meditate in order to think about what to buy people gifts. I mean, the rest of the story is I have 4 nieces in Portland, and what the next thought was, 4 headlamps, which was also a stroke of genius, which I can prove by the photograph. But the point is, I was, what the point is, I wasn't sitting down to meditate, to do my Christmas list. And yet there was space there for something fresh. And it just put two and two. And even as a graduate student working on a dissertation, I dove into meditation, and somehow the timing was right to even do retreats and so forth. And I certainly knew, okay, the retreat is not the time to work on my dissertation. And I had the wherewithal to not do that. That being said, there were those moments when something would pop into mind, which was a good idea. So I've had this experience many, many times, and it's not like this is, I don't think I will become someone who's teaching creativity, because it's basically teaching the same thing I teach, but then adding this on a little bit, right? That this, but there could, some of you might be able to, you know, I do feel confident that, yeah, meditation could be the foundation for like a really interesting sort of mature approach to creativity, where and of course the same thing in relational mindfulness, you know, where just like creating those structures, so simple, right, for the way we do with dyads and hot seats and so forth, just creating a structure where people can see each other, be seen. It is so simple, and yet it allows a space for creativity, and I still feel so much room for development of these sorts of things. Not because we offer people some sort of new complicated way of being social, but that we just clear the space. We offer a space which is radically simple and enables kind of people to get out of those normal habits so that they can just see each other. And this is where there's potential for you know, like Giselle Jones. Some of you know Giselle, was in the TMF, and is working with couples using a lot of relational mindfulness. And she visits my undergrad class from time to time. I always want more stories about couples and what did she do with them, you know. But in any case, well, I've rambled on here. Questions, comments, thoughts about any of this? Noriko, hi.
Hi. So since you mentioned relational mindfulness, I have a question facilitating relational mindfulness. How should I set the tone, or like in a skillful way to disclose myself, so that the group can like embody the questions rather than like exchanging information, like more like I don't know, like especially like in hot seats.
Yeah.
And I've experienced like a lot of embodied questions in like teen retreats or your undergrad classes, like, and I don't want to like generalize, but the young people are like very good at like just coming from like pure curiosity of who the person is.
Yeah.
Rather than like, I want to know about like their status or like their social information.
Have you
Which
been?
I see more in the adult group.
Have you been facilitating hot seats, Noriko, or something like it?
Yeah.
Good question. I think that the reminder, or including relational mindfulness in a context where people have been practicing mindfulness, so that there is that, it's good to kind of get them to get that instruction that they can be embodied and they can stay attuned to their bodies and so forth, as kind of a framework for that. But I don't think I have much advice about the specifics of your question. It's a really good question, and worthy of some research, maybe, or just thinking about. For me, I definitely know the frustration of facilitating a hot seat where, you know, it's just like, come on, you people, you know, come on, this is such an opportunity. and yet I trust the forum quite a lot, so that even when I feel as a facilitator, I don't try to change that. Like, I will participate, but I don't try to do anything to make it different than what it is. And sometimes and of course, it's not for everyone, for sure. And I have close friends, meditation friends, who it's not for them, and so that would be, you may find that you might be trying to do it with a group of people where maybe they're not really interested. But if they are interested in doing it, then I would just keep it simple, just let it be what it is, and model going with curiosity yourself, if you're comfortable asking questions as a facilitator, but don't get too involved in trying to make something different happen, and then, but also reminding them how important in this context it is to be going with curiosity, because if someone discloses something that we're all interested in, but we don't show that interest because we're being too polite, then they're gonna feel that, right? That my one example I use is, if what did you do today with a student? I worked on a paper, I had lunch with my girlfriend, we had a little fight, and then I came here. Thank you. So with that sort of answer, everyone in the room is going to be like, oh, what was the fight about? But our politeness can hinder us from asking, and it can be very frustrating when the group isn't going with curiosity because they're too shy, or they don't, so but my point was, the person who said that didn't have to say there was a fight, but he did say it, and then it would be odd for the group not to acknowledge that in some way, So you might even give an example if you're working with a group who really is, that they're really interested in it, but they don't seem to be kind of getting, going very far with just curiosity. You might give an example like that and just say, look, in this context, it's really, it's scary because we're doing something that wouldn't be polite. Even in that little example, it's like, even with a close friend, if they disclose something, we might be real cautious about going into it because, well, we don't know now if now's the right time, or do they really want to, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I would be happy to stay in touch with you about this, if you find that you have opportunities to facilitate relational mindfulness in whatever form. Definitely would be happy to be in touch with you. And that's a message for everyone here, whether it's about relational mindfulness or, working with beginners, or a practical issue. I really mean it. I am happy to be in touch about these things. And I told you I changed my mind about something at 11 o'clock a.m. last Saturday, Pacific time. Yeah. And Guna nods her head like, yeah, Marv, like, we got to hear this. So you all know how laid back I am. I don't know if people should meditate. I love to meditate. I love teaching it. I feel so fortunate, oh my God, to be doing what I'm doing, to be in a world connected with people like you, with these interests. And it especially when it comes to kids, I'm very wary of setting up situations where they're supposed to meditate and so forth. And you've probably heard me give spiels like that in that territory. And the other day I had brunch with this guy who works with that group called Whole School Mindfulness. And I think Stacy sent out a note that they're looking for mindfulness directors, which is their term for teachers who have school support for doing some mindfulness. So in any case, Ben Painter, I was having brunch with him, and he was talking about the hold of social media on kids and the algorithms that are being used to draw our attention. And I was like, oh my God, I know it's such a terrible problem. I don't know what to say. And he says, well, you know, this is why mindfulness training should be compulsory in schools at every age. And the timing was right for me. It was like, right, that's actually true. It's true. You know, the power of the machines is so intense that what we have to offer is important, and not just kind of, well, some of the kids will like it and blah, blah. It's like, no, done skillfully, of course, but kind of at least taking that step to help people at every age appreciate they have some choice where to place attention, even in the midst of scrolling and so forth. They can notice how they're feeling. Do they really want to be doing it, and so forth. So anyway, that I'm getting old, but at least I changed on that. And so now I'm an advocate. Every child should meditate at school. And and I'm not the one to do it, but there was one year, there was I was saying in TMF, I was saying something, you know, it's not to the entire group, but you know, being skillful with the different ages, it does involve you know, understanding the different developmental abilities and so forth. And so I was spouting off in my great wisdom how, you know, for all I know, there might be ages like 6th grade where it's just not the right time to teach meditation, you know. And it turned out there was a 6th grade teacher in the group who was like, Marv, you know, I've been teaching 6th graders to meditate for a long time. So you know, I think that this is actually an example of kind of like whatever you all are up to. I in a way, I'm really curious, you know. I don't mean to assume I know, but insofar as you have found ways to teach, to share, I think it's such an interesting opportunity and challenge to continue to learn, to find our voice, to keep in mind who we're talking with, who we're teaching, what's going to be, you know, useful to them. And the things I've shared are maybe they're more tuned. Maybe what I'm talking about, my experience is so much been with older teens and college students that, you know, it may be that a lot of what I'm saying is just kind of expressive of, well, this is what has worked pretty well in an academic setting where students are taking a course for credit and appreciate it. And maybe it's like I've really needed to keep it simple and repeat myself because what we're doing is so different from what they're normally doing in classes. Yeah, so I do mean it. I'm sure you have my email or know how to get it, but I'll put it in the chat. And would be happy to be in touch with you. And so should we stop at the appointed time? I can hang around a bit if you want, but thank you for coming. Yeah.
Thank you, Marv.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Marv. You know, I used to be a Montessori guide, right? And so we'd have, the school would say, hey, look, you have to teach meditation to the kids. And I really purposely would only do it with the older people in my group, because it was mixed ages, 2 to 7-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
And in the afternoons, I would have the group that was the 6 and 7-year-olds, and I always gave them a choice. And we did really simple things to train attention, like I would ring a bell and have them point to
Yeah.
it, or,
Yeah.
you know, just really, I think I used the term meditation once and they all sat down and did this, so it was like, okay, let's step back a little. And I do have a lot of opinions about that, working with young children and the language we use and, forcefulness of stuff.
Oh my God.
And if we're doing the greater good. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how to do it. That's for sure. With the younger folks. And before 11 o'clock on Saturday, I was much more of an advocate for, paying attention to the kid in the third grade in the back of the room who just doesn't get it and just is seeing this as just another way for adults to tell him to shut up, and it's like, okay, well, that's happening with arithmetic class also, and it's still valuable and important to teach arithmetic. And so it's just.
But I think emotional skills and language, right? Because, we know a lot of the children's frustration comes with not having the language for the emotions that they're feeling, right? So there are ways in. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, well, thank you all. It's a real treat to see you.
Thanks, Marv.
You're welcome. Good to see you all. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Marv.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Marvin.
You're welcome. Oh, good to see you, Maite. Yeah.
Thank you, Marv. Thank you, Stacy.
Yeah.